Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland. I am your host, Jim Pete. Today, joined by a now relaxing and calm Michael Hattery. Mike, happy Sunday.
Hey, how you doing, big boy?
Oh, jeez. It just keeps getting worse and worse. Oh, man. How's life? It's your finals week, right? Like, you got another week of hell, right?
Yeah, yesterday I had a take-home final where I wrote like 4,000 words on freedom of speech in the academic environment, so that was just a blast, and more fun to come.
Well, was that more fun to write or the gamer?
I think probably that.
All right, we're skipping the intro. We're just getting right into this. We got a ton to talk about with the Indians. Let's start with some fun. The bullpen, Mike, and we didn't actually. It was the one preseason positional preview we didn't do, although we did discuss several times in several podcasts how we thought the bullpen might be the best piece to this team, which is saying a lot considering some of the players that we have in the rotation and the offense that we've acquired as well as developed. The bullpen has a lot of really interesting little statistics, but they're first in many of them, including FIP, xFIP, ERA, batting average against. They're top 2 or 3 and lots of others. I think they're leading the league in Ks per 9 with almost 11 as a unit, which again says a lot. Now, obviously, the anchors are the givens, and we'll get to them in a second. Andrew Miller and Cody Allen, but they might not be the fun part of this bullpen. Obviously, there's different variables to all these, and some high leverage guys, and some mid leverage guys, and some guys who we just need for junk. And obviously, things will balance out as the year progresses, but. The way that our bullpen, and you really have to mention the starting rotation as well, because they've really balanced into this. The way that the two units have kind of meshed together and been able to balance each other out has been really interesting. The rotation hasn't probably been as good as we thought. And just to kind of throw some other numbers out there, Mike, the rotation still in the top 10 in several categories, K per 9 wins, FIP, xFIP. They're 6th in FIP, 2nd in xFIP. 6th overall WAR for the starters. If we've got top 5, 6, 7 category starting rotation, and we've got top 2, 3 bullpen, how many wins does this team have at the end of the year? Even if our offense struggles, and we know it won't, but even if our offense struggles for a lot of this year, if our bullpen and rotation continues down this path, how many wins does this team get?
If the offense doesn't pick up, 85, 86. I don't think – it's a good rotation and elite bullpen, but I don't know. It's a tough equation. I don't know how to answer. It's a good question. I don't think I have, a good answer.
Well, if you balance it out with the American League, if you look at the AL East, you're looking at the New York Yankees, who maybe I don't know what their average age is, but it can't be – much over 26 or 27. So you got a really young team leading that lead. I guess the two teams there to watch. Overall, unless the Yankees somehow manage to acquire lots more, maybe veterans as the year progresses. But I think we're looking at Baltimore and Boston as the year progresses. All the Yankees, that young Yankees team would be interesting. They make Clint Frazier kind of be. Clint Frazier has become the we're trading him for something guy. But if you look at the AL, and you look at maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 different teams to maybe look out for. Really, at the end of the day, maybe 3 or 4. Talking about the Astros, the Red Sox, and Baltimore. Perhaps there's a couple other teams in the mix. You still think 85, 86 if the offense doesn't pick up? The Central sucks.
Yeah, the Central really sucks. It's a fair question.
You're making okay, back to the bullpen. All right. back to the bullpen. All right, so let's talk. And this is your opportunity, Mike, to talk about. We'll get to Allen and Miller in a second. What's your favorite part of the bullpen?
I don't know. I mean, other than Allen and Miller, I don't know. They don't count though, right? Like Miller's not a reliever; he's a cyborg. Nick Goody, it really interests me. I find him really interesting, and I've been surprised. I think Tito's used him pretty aggressively for a guy that they didn't even keep with the team out of spring training. We've seen him in multiple spots in one-run games. He has a pretty full arsenal for a reliever. He doesn't have top-end velocity, but, low 90s, and he has a nice slider changeup combo. I think he's really interesting. He commands the baseball. He gets a lot of swing and miss. He has a nice mix. I think he's someone who looks like a textbook seventh inning guy long term. And Shaw's getting paid around $5 million this year and isn't getting cheaper after that. And I think, long term, I also feel like the Indians do things that have longer term implications than we think. And I think you and I have discussed this with Chisenhall. And I think if you look at how the Indians are using Chisenhall in center, I don't think it's only about finding someone to play center field. It's about figuring out who Lonnie Chisenhall is with the Cleveland Indians for the next 2 years. When his salary escalates to $7 million and he's a platoon bat in right field, the Indians can't do that. So either he plays center, and he plays it well enough for them to be interested in keeping him, or he plays it well enough for them to say, we can move him as an asset and move on. And I think that's sort of similar with Shaw. We're seeing Goody getting tried a little bit in these high leverage spots to see if, we can transition away and not pay a league average reliever $7 million to pitch in the seventh inning.
Yeah, I trading Shaw though. I don't know, man. I don't know.
We'll talk about it in the offseason.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Do you see? I guess you've kind of broached the topic of Lonnie Chisenhall and the outfield, and I don't want to jump too far away from the bullpen. We can come back to this, but the outfield continues to be interesting to me in a variety of different ways. So let's segue into Yandy Diaz. We'll come back to the bullpen because I do want to talk about Miller and Allen. Yesterday, Nomina and a DM shows us Terry Pluto's article discussing how the Indians are considering calling up Yandy Diaz a couple of weeks after they sent him down because they wanted him specifically for left-handed pitching. Now, Mike, I'm just going to throw this to you in a second, but I do want to throw out a couple of variables here. When they sent him down for a couple of reasons. At least that's what we were told. They sent him down because they needed him to get regular at bats, and they also needed him to play a little bit more in all of these other positions so that he could get more defensive work. So clearly in those 2 weeks, Mike, he's gotten enough at bats and enough playing time in these other positions to make it okay for him only to hit every so often, maybe 2 or 3 games a week, right?
I don't even understand. I don't understand the situation at all. I think you make a really good point. I don't understand this. And certainly, we have Yandy Diaz not playing Sunday. After Saturday, Pluto writes this up. And while Pluto's not super plugged in, or as much as he used to be, he's still plugged in enough that I think at times we'll see things sort of floated before they're going to happen. Wouldn't be surprised if Diaz is back in Cleveland in the next 6 days. So I think that's pretty likely. Of course, reading what Pluto said, every part of it sort of offended me. He wasn't sent down there to hit a lot. He already can do that. I also find it so offensive that we act like because you're the 25th man on the roster, we can't use you more than 1 day every 2 weeks. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I've noticed it's getting really much more rampant on Twitter, and it's the Michael Martinez defense. It's this sort of litigation proceeding where you say, well, he sucks, but they only use him for, 4 PAs a month. So why do we care? And it's yeah, you don't have to use someone that way. They use Michael Martinez that way because he sucks. You don't have to use the 25th roster spot in a way that they suck. If they're good, you can use them to, manipulate splits, which is something that Terry Francona is really good at, which is why this makes no sense. You can get Diaz PAs in left field at third base, especially when Kipnis and Brantley, Kipnis cannot find the strike zone against left-handed pitching. Brantley needs time off, and also you could give him rest against left-handed pitching. This team is not hitting left-handed pitching.
It seems like without too much effort, they find 3 games a week for him. Playing third base, moving J-Ram over to second, playing left, giving Brantley a day off, and somewhere else, anywhere else. And I know it's hard to believe that they might just plug a guy in somewhere where they haven't played him before, but they do it all the time. And he's played second base. He's played shortstop in his career. He's played center field in his career. He's played right field in his career. Seems kind of easy to find a third game or maybe even a fourth, which is Pluto even mentioned it, by the way. I mean,
it's really easy to find him 15 PAs a week. So to me, the Michael Martinez, that guy doesn't get PAs thing is the dumbest, most embarrassing argument I've ever heard. I hope you're listening to the podcast. But further, what I will say is I think that this is a team also that you have to protect a lot of these guys. Like Kipnis and Brantley, even if Kipnis gets righted, like these are early 30s guys. Brantley's had multiple surgeries. He has an ankle injury now. Kipnis had a major oblique injury 2 years ago, which destroyed his production. This season we have an arm injury that he so far has been completely unproductive. He beats up his body playing second base in a way that's really going to shorten his career, and the Indians have long-term options. And this is a team that isn't playing to figure out who it is. This is a team that's playing to be good in October. And part of playing to be good in October is Jason Kipnis doesn't need to play 150 games. And Michael Brantley doesn't need to play 150 games, especially when you have someone who can be pretty competent offensively and defensively and keep those guys fresh. It's like, Alcides Escobar plays every day. That's awesome. He also sucks offensively, so he's harming his team. I don't know why we don't think that we can use that last spot in a flexible way that really improves this roster and also improves how that roster is when we get late in the year and limits injury risk. So what the hell?
So do you think, is Yandy coming up? That's the thing. He didn't play today. It almost to me seems like a troll move, but it seems now with this potential with Brantley being with this ankle injury does kind of give them an opening, but do they DFA Martinez? And how long until they bring him back up? Because nobody's going to pick him up, and he's going to end up in Columbus. Do you see this happening? Is this finally the end of Michael Martinez?
He'll never die. Like other great soldiers, he'll merely fade away, to quote Douglas MacArthur.
He clearly, when he said that, was thinking of Michael Martinez.
I fervently believe so.
All right, let's get away from that. I guess the bigger picture here, Mike, is what we're doing against left-handed pitching, and we haven't really had a chance to kind of dive into it. And I was mentioning today, maybe perhaps for some time in the near future, getting you on top of all these lefties that have been dominating us. Obviously, some of the problem is Brantley, some of the problem is Kipnis, but beyond that, we haven't been hitting left-handed pitching, and it's not just a couple of guys. Why? What's going on? Is it we have very competent hitters? Is it just the luck of the draw? We've got some guys struggling, at least had been struggling. You mentioned Carlos Santana, but he's coming out of it now. But we've had some guys struggling early in the year. Is it just the luck of the draw? Is this team just, even without making too many moves, maybe the Yandy Diaz move, but even without anything else, this team's going to improve against lefties, right? Or is this something we're just going to struggle with, and we're going to see teams start to stack some lefty starters against us?
I think one of the issues is that on an outcomes basis, one of the hitters who's best against left-handed pitching in Encarnacion just isn't there yet, and I think he will be. So I think that's going to get better. The other thing is, Brandon Guyer went from being the one of the best players in baseball against left-handed pitching to someone who looks pretty lost right now offensively against left-handed pitching. He's not pulling the ball as much. He's hitting it on the ground more. He's hitting it softer. There are a few positive signs today, but he just doesn't look the same against left-handed pitching. And so, I sort of expect he's young. There's no reason. I know he said he's mechanically not comfy right now, but there's no reason to think he doesn't get comfortable. And when that happens, I don't really think they have any issues against left-handed pitching. But, we don't know if that's going to happen. But I think that's something that's sort of going to fade away. Obviously, I think the Indians have a lot more power against right-handed pitching. If you look at the guys who are adding power, both Ramirez and Lindor have a lot more power from the left side of the plate. So they're just going to hit right-handed pitching better than they hit left-handed pitching. Brantley and Kipnis. Kipnis hasn't done anything, so that doesn't count. But Brantley's just not going to hit it as well. Santana even has less power against left-handed pitching than he does against right-handed pitching. So I think we lose a lot of power there. So I think unless you sort of like make that up with, Encarnacion and Geyer getting it going, then it could be a sustained issue. Or you could just call up Yandy Diaz and that could help it out too. So, I don't know. He can only play once a week if he's in the utility role though. So, I don't know. Those are the rules, right? Is that in the bylaws of Major League Baseball? I don't know. That's what someone was telling me. It was some sort of like requirement with that final roster spot. So I'm just making sure it's not in the rules somewhere.
It's a frustrating take, especially considering the fact that Yandy Diaz wouldn't really be the 25th spot. But I understand that we have some other guys that are platooning and maybe have some fixed regular time, but you can't convince me at any point that Yandy Diaz doesn't immediately become one of our top 10 hitters and immediately a better fielder than a few guys that we've already mentioned. But, let's just throw Lonnie Chisenhall out in center field and look with one eye and say he's getting to be really competent out there. But I'll back away and leave that to be because Yandy Diaz, one of the most athletic people I've ever seen play in the minors, is clearly not the guy to be able to do that. So let's move away from that. I know we'll get some snipe attacks on that. I don't care. It is what it is. Yandy Diaz should be on the 25-man roster, never should have left. And it wasn't a control issue. He is going to be 26 in August. They have control of him through his age 32 year. And if they wanted to sign him to something to extend, they'll be able to do that. Okay, I feel better now. All right. So I want to talk Cody Allen. I want to talk Andrew Miller. Cody Allen seems to have taken another step, Mike. It's easy to forget that this guy is entering. We're talking about a really young pitcher here, and it seems like he's been around forever. This is a guy who launched through the system in less than 18 months. People forget that, and has essentially been the high leverage closer, one of our best high leverage relievers over the past 3 full seasons. How much better is he going to get? He's one of the elite relievers in the game right now. Have we, caught a rocket on the way up? Do we have just one of those guys whose ceiling is really high as far as relievers go?
Can he get any better than he's pitching right now? It's like I don't think it's physically or humanly possible.
Well, I'm really intrigued. I'm yes, because I can name a couple of guys who pitched better than he did. I don't want to make any comps, but let me ask you this: Andrew Miller domino effect. Is this one of those scenarios where, and again, this is very unscientific here, but is this one of those competitive scenarios where you add a guy in the fashion that maybe Corey Kluber works at with regards to the rotation? Do you add a guy like Miller, and does that immediately make the other guys better? Not only because Miller's so much better, but because they start maybe gaining some habits and start trying to compete with one of the best relievers in baseball.
Yeah, I really think that could be part of it. And I also think that there's something to, Allen was the only above average reliever in Cleveland for quite a while. And I think that came with a lot of stress and responsibility. And I think we saw him coming in for 4-out saves and on teams where, he was it. And I think that, really isn't the case anymore. The Indians have an awesome matchup guy in Boone Logan. Shaw's competent. Miller, before this season was the best reliever in baseball, though now Cody Allen would like to sort of compete with him on the same team. So that's certainly fun. But, man, he's an animal. The man, he's throwing a little less with the velo wise on the fastball, but it's still sitting 94. And what's really interesting, I think, is the usage rate on that knuckle curve's growing a little bit. We're seeing a little more of it. He's leveraging it more, and he's getting the tons of swing and miss he always does. I mean, that's a plus pitch, and I think that's been a part of it. I think his usage has been a little different, and I think that's been valuable.
Any concerns at all with regards to usage up to this point? I mean, there's this kind of rubber banding going on right now where you have like stretches of games with the rotation looking great. Then you have these stretches where they don't look so great, but you have the bullpen compensating. Everything seems to be going pretty well. I guess when I talk usage, I guess I have to ask this question. I'm kind of moving away from the bullpen, but you'll see where I'm getting at here. How concerned are you with the rotation?
I'm concerned.
Yeah, Kluber goes out, and while it's a seemingly minor injury, whenever you talk about injuries with rotation guys, especially a rotation that suddenly looks as thin as ours does, which is odd considering the 3, 4, 5 guys got, well, no, not 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 6, I guess, pitched fairly well over the weekend. But, again, where's the depth? I mean, we don't have a lot of depth. You look at the Columbus rotation right now, and it's not looking all that great. We already in the previous podcast talked about struggle. Clevenger, while he looked great, again, there's definitely some concerns there with control. If a guy like Kluber does happen to go down, or if we have another one of those seasons like we had in 2013, and I know they ended up making the playoffs, but if you remember 2013, Mike, that was the year that we had fairly major injuries, 3 to 4 week misses for almost every starter in that rotation, obviously, except for, I think, Kazmir was the only one in that rotation that year that didn't go out. Kazmir and Ubaldo Jimenez, but we had I think that was the year Kluber missed a month. That was the year Masterson missed a month. That was the year Salazar came up and came down, and it was kind of that weird year. And I think Kluber missed a month that year as well, if I remember correctly. Is this rotation built to handle that? I mean, Kluber kind of carried everybody last year. Once we had all those injury issues, but what happens if Kluber goes down? Who is there to replace him? And as much as I'd love to jump on the Michael Clevenger bandwagon, is there a real concern there that one thing goes down with this rotation and we're in serious trouble?
Oh yeah. I really, being the negative person that I am, the person who pours cold water on everything, I think sort of my responsibility. Carrasco's been great. He's had, and he has an injury history, but they've been fluky. So I think one of the positives is, maybe you finally get that 200 inning season out of Carrasco. My cat would like to play with the microphone that I have currently right now, so that's going to make for some fun audio. I think Salazar is just like one of the riskiest pitchers in baseball, arm health wise. And so these people who want to punt Bauer, I'm just like, where are you getting those other 180 innings? That's all I want to know, because if you punt Bauer and then have Tomlin, you need to cover 200 to 250 innings with someone that you trade for or someone from AAA. And I'm not sold Clevenger's that dude. And even if Clevenger stays in the rotation and has a good year, I'm not sold he's going to cover the innings we want. To me, right now, he's a 5 and fly dude if he works well, because he's walking way too many dudes. His pitch count runs up. You can't succeed in the big leagues with a walk rate like from 3.5 to 4.15 per nine, if you're not striking out 13 per nine, if you're not Danny Salazar, and even him, like his margins are thin. He's a good pitcher, but his margins are thin. And like that's sort of, like Clevenger's walking 3 to 3.5 in the minors per nine, and it doesn't get better when hitters get more selective. And so I'm just that command thing. He's, even if he succeeds in his role, I don't see him going deep a lot, which also has some cost. The Indians need Trevor Bauer to be good this year. Like, it sucks. He's a prick. It's frustrating as can be. His command is not good. But the Indians need him to eat 180 innings and be a league average starter. And so people can, get as angry as they want on Twitter. They can get as impatient as they want. But, you better be ready for the Bauer train because they need it to work.
Well, so, with a lot of teams already seemingly ready to fold up camp for the year, there's a lot of interesting starting rotation guys that could be available. I mean, is this going to be the July in which the Indians go all in again? Maybe we do have some talent in the minor leagues. Is this the year they go all in and get a starter? I mean, they didn't get a starter. We called for a starter in a few podcasts last year in the offseason, and incredulously they didn't really go and do that. I think they Rule 5 the guy, and I think they they did their infamous minor league stuff, signing their guys that didn't really pan out. But they didn't really even do that. They didn't even throw a flyer out on an old veteran whose arm's about to fall off. How in the hell did they not go out and get a starter? B, do you think there's a decent chance that they may throw a package together and try to bring in one of these named starters for a team that perhaps is out of it, come late June, early July?
I mean, as excited as I am to see some Tim Cooney action, maybe a little Carlos Frias. And look, I think those were good depth trades, and I think they were smart. And, and the acquisition of Cooney, I think that's a cool gamble developmentally long term. But he's just not going to be, he's sort of like a non-impact. And it's time for a frank conversation.
I want to say they released Cooney too. I think he's gone.
And then they signed him.
Did they re-sign him again? Okay. It must have been one of those contracts where, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Let's be frank. Sean Morimondo is not a big league starter. He might be an interesting loogie guy. I think the Indians should have converted him there a while ago. Ryan Merritt isn't a big league starter. He may be a cool spot starter 4 or 5 times a year. You might be able to do some cool piggyback stuff with him if the Indians want to get really creative. But he's just not a big league starter, especially for a team that's trying to win a division. So I think there is a really significant possibility that the Indians are sort of going to be pressured into patching that up. On the other hand, one of the things that's interesting is I'm still, I think we're all really down on this offense right now, and I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that this is still going to be one of the best offenses in baseball, and we've just seen some sort of weird stuff. And when you couple that with how elite this bullpen is and how bad the Central is, I think there's a decent chance that the Indians can be in such good control come the trade deadline that they can sort of say, like, look, yeah, we get it. We only have 3 really quality starters, but, like, we're only starting 3 in October. And we got by with Josh Tomlin and Trevor Bauer pitching really important starts last year, so we don't really care. I think they may be talented enough to say, hey, let's do that. Not expend any assets that can sort of supplement later. And I think they may be in position to do that. But I also, I think the odds they trade for starters are so expensive, though. I mean, we've seen guys who, like Bud Norris a couple of years ago, was like a major trade target, and he's at best like a middle reliever. The cost is insane.
The cost is insane, but if we see a flooding of the market, if we see 9, 10, 11 guys out there, it could become very interesting, especially when you consider the fact that, the asking price for Jose Quintana this offseason was ridiculous. Nobody bit. Now a guy like him is struggling. I mean, we could have a couple of guys out there that maybe this past offseason would have been huge, created these huge deals, but perhaps there might be a guy out there that we can steal. I don't know. It's way too far ahead to look at that. I worry about the depth, but I guess with the bullpen balance, I'm worrying about the depth is fairly silly right now. But you get these little injuries, especially to a guy like Kluber, and you start to get concerned, especially when eventually someone like Danny Salazar is going to have a tweak here and there. But hopefully we can get through the season without having to worry about that. Overall, though, thank goodness for the rotation. Thank goodness for the bullpen. It's early. It's May. At the end of the day, our negativeness is probably, we'll have these stretches. But we do want to, before we wrap things up, and I don't want this to go too long. I don't have a lot to say about the minor leagues, but I do have a few things. Mike, I want to start with you, and I know you want to talk about a starter in particular, but as you look at the minor league depth overall, and as I sit here saying we could package together a deal, and we could. We do have some top end guys. You just look at some of the guys that that were in the Lucroy deal that are still kind of sitting down there, including a guy like Bradley Zimmer, who wasn't in that deal, but certainly would be enticing even with his early season struggles. It still feels like we're awfully top heavy. I'm not saying that we don't have any guys that we're in the midst of developing, but it feels like past 4 or 5 guys at the top level, there really isn't a whole lot of meat in the sandwich, if you get what I'm saying. It seems like the minor league organization right now is missing some heart, and maybe a part of that is the deal that we swung last year. But are you concerned at all? I mean, it seems like in particular. Our pitching. I'm not super thrilled with our overall pitching, although there's 2 or 3 guys that are super interesting. Any top end concerns there, Mike, with regards to our system overall, and then specifically, who's a guy or two that are standing out to you?
Yeah, I mean, they're in that sort of strange lag period where they've just graduated in the last couple of years. Decent amount of dudes, and then obviously AAA has like 3 guys who are going to impact this team, although Bradley Zimmer is once again run amok with strikeouts. The pitching's a huge problem. I'm obviously not super high on Clevenger. I think he can be a competent big league starter if some stuff works out, but he's like it from AA up right now. The only guy in AA I'm pretty interested in right now is Thomas Pannone, who's a left-hander, and he was called up to AA about 2 or 3 days ago, so he's sort of not on the radar for this year, I would think. There's not much else there unless you're, a really big Julian Merriweather fan, which apparently is cause to move Danny Salazar to the bullpen, I've been told. That's hilarious.
I think I just real quick on Pannone. He's a guy that is definitively an under the radar guy. He is 23, so it's not like he's a young guy. I mean, moving him up to Akron gets him closer to age level. But obviously he's a lefty. Is this a guy, Mike, that you see? This is the jump, when everybody starts talking about, can they make this jump to AA? What do you like most about Pannone, other than obviously his left-handedness, and he's got some velocity there, but what are his attributes that you think can maybe bring him eventually up to the big league level?
It's got a good mix. He has 2 secondary offerings that people seem to be really high on now this year. He's got a slider changeup combo, which I think is really positive. His fastball's played up velocity-wise this year. It's playing up to, like 93, 94, which is a lot better than a guy who's low 90s or high 80s when they drafted him. The command's been awesome. Obviously he was older for his level, but I think he just turned 23. It's not like he's been he basically just turned 23 when he was promoted, so he's still, at a pretty decent age to be in Akron. You flash those K rates, he gets a pretty solid amount of ground balls. He's getting around 47% this year, which is really good. all those things. If you have a high ground ball rate, get a good K rate, and aren't walking too many guys, I like that. And then, you combine the scouting reports when you have, an arsenal beyond just like a fastball that you're using to take advantage of A-plus guys with, that excites me.
All right, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were still talking about pitching in particular, but the system overall.
Yeah. Yeah. The system's a mess. No, it's not. There's some really good talent. It's just, it's really, it seems like there's this really large chasm between guys who are ready now and the next couple of years. I think the Indians have also had guys take steps back. I mean, Chang looks completely overmatched in Akron right now, which has to be a concern. But he's ultimately positionally blocked for the next friggin' 5 years anyway, so there's no rush with him. Bobby Bradley is still striking out a ton. His walk rate's cool. He's showing a lot of power in Akron, but we would have liked to have seen that change a little bit this year. Greg Allen's looked rock solid. His plate discipline numbers are the same. He's stealing tons of bases and not getting caught. His defense is really good. But there were some sort of wafts of him being able to add a little power and maybe a little more contact authority, and we haven't seen that early, although I think he's closer than most people think. Not as close. Perhaps I'm not ahead of you on that because you're certainly much higher on him than even I, but I think he's pretty close to ready. But we've seen a lot of guys just take step back. Brady Aiken, honestly looks like he's probably not going to work out, and I think, people haven't been really honest about that yet, but this is a guy who isn't touching 90 right now. He has no command. He's just not the same guy. He never got his velocity back after the second surgery, which was very complex. So I just think there are a couple of things that haven't hit, and when those things don't hit, it doesn't look great. And then they took these two prep bats last year in the first round who, sort of like huge variance investments, you take Will Benson and Nolan Jones and they're just huge gambles. That's what they are. And so that creates a really high variance in the system. There are cool spots. Is there anybody who stood out to you? I'm really interested in Logan Ice.
He's a name that keeps popping up. Anytime you have a catcher in particular who's got some skill defensively, but is showing a little bit of bat, he's intriguing to me. Honestly, other than Pannone, because of you, there hasn't been. And the interesting thing about Pannone too, Mike, that you didn't mention is while he does move up, to AA, and I don't see this being like a guy who's going to bounce right up to AAA. There isn't really a whole lot in front of him. I know that AAA starting rotation is full right now, but you've got like a guy like Pletko who's getting just beat down. That whole rotation in Columbus just looks. Well, they're struggling, and it's interesting because Pannone doesn't have a whole lot sitting in front of him. So if he excels at Lynchburg, they moved him up early. This is not something they generally do, especially with starters. So it's a curiosity to me at why they've moved him up this early. But I don't know. We shall see. The big thing for me, kind of looking at kind of those top end guys is just to see if there was legitimately anybody who could. Maybe make a splash with the team, kind of moving forward this year. And Zimmer, the great swing experiment of 2017. I've seen a couple of swings that look like they've reverted back a little bit to his old swing. Old habits do die hard. As you mentioned, he's striking out again at an alarming rate. Again, the guy that stands out to me is Greg Allen. I'm curious to see kind of as we kind of move forward if any of these starters at any level can kind of pick up the pace. But, there isn't really anybody standing out to me aside from, hopefully, I don't know, like Richie Schaefer. Is he ever going to play for the Indians, or is he just a guy that we picked up is he the next fad for all of us kind of, I don't know, stat geeks to kind of watch and gaze at? What are the chances he never plays for the Indians?
Higher than I'd like to admit.
They immediately talk about Yandy Diaz coming up and no Richie Schaefer, but such is life. Is it possible Tyler Naquin doesn't make it back to the Indians this year?
How depressing is that? I mean,
I don't mean to. He's playing really well.
during-
He's playing well. I mean, he's his on base clip is way up. I looked at it the other day and it was almost like 500. So it's not like he's not playing well, but it seems like he's disappeared a little bit, doesn't it?
He just went on the DL too.
Yeah.
From my bit. So I mean, he'll be up with at the very least with the September call-ups, but. Well, once the Indians just like all of a sudden out of nowhere decided to commit to Lonnie Chisenhall, center fielder against right-handed pitching, I don't know where that puts Tyler Naquin, but it doesn't put him in a good position. And honestly, like Abraham Almonte, like he's just a better fourth outfielder because his PAs are awesome. And I know like you can be frustrated, he's on like an 0 for his last 15, but he's also still got a 350 plus OBP. He puts up great plate appearances. He moves runners over. He's so useful.
It doesn't feel like they're anywhere close to moving him anywhere. It seems like he's pretty established, especially because defensively, and again, this is not a rip on Chisenhall per se, but defensively, I mean, he's arguably the best defensive outfielder we have. And that may be a statement in and of itself, but I don't think Almonte's going anywhere. I think he's as locked as it can be. I mean, if it seems weird. Well, I take that back. I mean, I think Almonte gets moved if they see somebody else performing at a high clip, but if they bring Yandy Diaz up, I mean, there's not many more moves to be made in that outfield, is there? Because, I mean, Diaz comes up, and you theoretically have Diaz being able to play in the outfield. You theoretically have Jose Ramirez who can play in the outfield. I mean, there aren't really too many moves to be had, and now you got Chisenhall playing center field without hesitation. I mean, where does that leave Tyler Naquin aside from perhaps trade bait? And what does he offer another team? Is there another team out there that goes, hey, I really want Tyler Naquin?
Who knows? I wouldn't. He's a good project. He hits the ball pretty hard. He's an outfielder. He's young, who has like a lot of control. So in that way, like I don't think he's not an asset. I mean, I think he's a useful asset. Chisenhall's like Michael Bode's written on this. I really respect Mike. He and I have some different takes. One of them is on Lonnie Chisenhall in the center field experiment. I'm fine with the experiment. I don't have any issues with it, but I'm going to be honest at this point in it. He looks pretty bad.
Yeah.
I think to be a center fielder who's getting really bad reads all the time, you have to sort of like argue that he has good closing speed. And like, I think Lonnie Chisenhall is really athletic, but I don't think he has like some sort of elite closing speed. So I'm not all in on that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, to be fair, we've seen some other guys get plugged into positions and they've been bad at every stage of the game and in ways that only you and I could be bad at playing center field or left field or right field. We've seen some projects that have looked considerably worse than Lonnie Chisenhall, to be fair. That being said, I've seen a couple of very intriguing routes that Lonnie has taken, and he's not. I mean, he's a good athlete. Don't get me wrong. It's just, I keep coming back to this learning on the fly thing in Major League Baseball. And this is maybe more to the management system here than anything else. Like, this is not fair to Lonnie Chisenhall. Like, how the hell do you just plug a guy in center field without even giving it 2 games? 2 games in the minors, or 2 games in the summer. I don't know. It just seems like they're setting the guy up to fail. But that being said, that's a message. I mean, the message sent is, if we're willing to do this with Lonnie, well, the hell with you, Tyler, right?
Yeah, that seems like the message.
Which seems like the perfect name for this podcast and perhaps the perfect way to segue out of this. Mike, as we wrap things up, anything you'd like to plug or anything you'd like to point towards heading into this week?
You writing a corner this week?
I am. I have no idea on what, which is concerning it's due tomorrow morning. But yeah, no, I am actually going to be writing a corner. I'm looking at the lineup and how it could change if Michael Brantley's out for more than a game or two, and how it could be permanent.
Ooh. All right, so Rejim's Corner. I don't even know. I think I traded out of gamer duty this week. I have my final exam. After this week, um, I'll be sort of transitioning back into much more writing again. One of the other things is that I will be doing a lot more coverage time in Akron. I think it's the most talented roster, and I'm going to be in the booth taking a look at them a little bit and hopefully providing some WFNY coverage on that. So look out for that, and I'm sure Jim will be around some parks too. I understand that minor league coverage is the most popular coverage, but our goal is sort of to bring you a little something different, a little something new. I don't really care about the gamers. I don't care about box scores. I want to bring you some sort of insight into how the Indians view development and, the development of certain guys. So I think we're going to try and do some of that.
And I think probably the most promising thing of Mike perhaps being in Akron is when they get in discussions talking about, say, I don't know, moving Danny Salazar to the bullpen. Perhaps he can shift them in another direction because that's ridiculous. Our bullpen's great. We need rotation, guys. Yes, let's move one of our top 3 starters to the bullpen. Sorry, I digress. But we will be in the goal this year is for WFNY to start diving into minor league coverage. And really the best way to do that is to get our feet on the ground. So, the odd thing for me is I'll actually be able to do it in Ohio instead of Carolina where they used to be. So probably the one team we won't be covering, I guarantee it, because I'm not going to Lynchburg is the Lynchburg team, but look for, feet on the ground and all the other buildings this year. Perhaps not every day, but as much as we can get there. So in the summer, it's all I got to do in the summer. So who knows where I'll show up. All right. That being said, we're going to close things up here. Like I said, my goal is 8. I already cut it down to 7 in the last podcast. Maybe I should cut it down to 6. Really fire everybody up. Oh, and those of you watching on YouTube, it looks like Mike and I's heads are floating in the dark. Please appreciate that. That's CGI. All right. On that note, peace.